Hello everybody, welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And finally, check out our new altar sleeves. Get your custom sleeve image of the Magic Mics crew at altarsleeves.com/magicmics. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
How's it going?
Ruben Bressler.
That was unironically the cleanest intro you've ever done.
We've really struggled the last couple
of
weeks.
That was fantastic. Well done.
Thank you. I appreciate
nice.
that.
You're getting there.
I tried.
And the lights hitting you just right.
Right? He's got that Florida glow happening. You can see that the family life and the having a cat is like beneficial.
Cats,
and being down one kid.
Right. That'll add some lives.
Minus kid plus pretty cool space.
Hashtag 4 kids left. We're getting there.
It's like, and then there were none. The Irwin version just.
Haven't earned none.
Look, the nest has got to get empty one way or another. All right. We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention. Well, Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Time Spiral remastered cards. Ruben?
Yeah, and speaking of the light hitting just right, this comment really made me feel a warm inner glow from Tuba Smitty 2. Out of all the time-shifted cards, there is one that stands out to me. This one card is unquestionably, in my mind, the most worthy of donning the classic border. One card that is truly a celebration of Magic's history. Yawgmoth Thran Physician. One of, if not the most evil and oldest characters in the game. A name synonymous with the blessed perfection of Phyrexia. A character integral to Magic's history. The Ineffable was finally given their card, and now they are rightfully in the frame they were always meant to have.
Showed up in Modern Horizons. The Yawgmoth Thran Physician is 2 black, 2 generic mana for a 2/4 mythic legendary human cleric with protection from humans. Pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. Or 2 black, discard a card and proliferate, which means choosing a number of permanents and or players and then give them each another counter of each kind already there.
Currently seeing play in Modern thanks to Tom Ross, who created the Black-Green Yawgmoth deck, which is a deck that revolves around Young Wolf, Strangleroot Geist, Geralf's Messenger, and this, where you essentially can form an infinite combo or loop and kill people with the help of Court of Calling and things like that. So another one of those cards that I famously said this was Commander Legends. I was wrong. This was another card that I did not anticipate ever seeing competitive play, and it is. And just a solid tier 1.5, tier 2 deck that puts up results occasionally. Who knew?
And it's just one of Tuba Smitty, absolutely right. Indelible character from the very beginning. And to get the old border treatment, I think it's exactly the right card.
I mean, this gave us the Jerry Thompson cosplay.
That too.
That alone has put so
Jerry.
much into our lives. It's incredible. Yeah, this card was absolutely terrific. Like it was just like sort of super riveting to see the big bad. You know, this is the Darth Vader of the Magic universe or whatever.
Because they had really only been alluded to, where we had like Yawgmoth's Agenda, which I just discovered recently. Yawgmoth's Bargain. Mm-hmm. You had the legendary,
obviously. But...
Yeah, you had the legendary sorcery of like a Yawgmoth's last.
Vile Rebirth.
Yeah, and
Vile Offering.
Yeah, we had, Priest of Yawgmoth or Yawgmoth's Demon or something. So there had been just these illusions. The name had been used, but there had always been avatars or, people bearing its name. And this was truly, this is really the guy.
More like Darth Sidious than Darth Vader because it appeared off screen so much. And much like the monster in House on Haunted Hill, you didn't even see it. It was just this aura of fear around this character, and then we finally get him on screen. Mm-hmm. The old border treatment on it is perfect.
I mean, we literally just saw Vortenklex show up in Kaldheim, so let's do this. Return to Phyrexia, can't wait. Well, congratulations to Tuba Smitty 2. Please contact us on social media before we block you. We don't know. We might. Who knows?
Before someone blocks you
Someone blocks you somewhere.
Contact the Magic Mike's social
Magic
media.
Mike's subreddit, the Magic Mike's Twitter, Magic Mike's Facebook, something. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. All right, because it is time to talk about Greg Staples, an awesome artist who's been in Magic a very long time, and he has a penchant for a specific creature type, I think. But, I mean, my picks are all over the map in terms of sort of what he's done. Spells, creatures, whatever. I think everything but a land, more or less. Almost for me.
Not really a land artist so much, but when you look at a Greg Staples, I mean, he has a couple lands, but when you look at a Greg Staples piece, and we'll talk about this as we go, you see a couple of specific things that most artists can't encapsulate in such a small space.
Well, let's get that started with number 10. Ruben, what you got?
One of those things that he can encapsulate is depth. Usually there's a foreground, there's a background. That's what you get with a Magic card. And that's great, you know? We love our Kev Walkers. We love our Rebecca Gays, but those are, and they're beautiful pieces. What was that?
Hashtag gay pride.
Hashtag gay pride, exactly.
That's right.
But you don't really get the deep three-dimensional feel that you get. Greg Staples really can do that with his command of light and shadow, his ability to make three-dimensional space, and I really don't feel like there's a card that I look at and I go, wow, that is a spectacular panorama as Global Ruin. Global Ruin is a rare from Invasion. 4 colorless and a white for a sorcery. Each player chooses from the lands they control a land of each basic land type, then sacrifices the rest. This came, of course, at a pivotal point in the Invasion. The crux point, like the point where they made landfall. And there is a huge, like, mushroom cloud off in the distance as the Weatherlight is flying towards it. There's a storm front in the background. And you just get this feeling of scale without even needing any particular scale birds or anything like that.
Right.
You can sense how huge this piece is.
Right, knowing how sort of close the ship is and how far away that gigantic blast is. And, like, this is where, like, the planes are, like, molding or whatever. Like, one's kind of layering on top or something. I can't remember exactly how they said it.
If you're familiar with the plot of Invasion, basically the plane of Wrath overlaid over the plane of Dominaria, and that was the invasion.
Right.
Yeah. And this mechanically is a well that Wizards has pulled from before when it comes to wipe. We've seen Cataclysm, Cataclysmic Gearhulk, Tragic Arrogance. This is how they like white to do their board wipes now, and it's interesting just to see how far back that really goes.
Yeah. And this is also essentially using Domain, which was one of the keywords from the block.
Yeah, this is very sort of the Sundering Titan-esque almost ability when used colorlessly. All right, cool. Aaron, what's number 10?
My number 10 is a fun card. I believe it sees play in Pauper in the burn decks. And I just think it's a very whimsical card. I think the flavor text really sells it for me, but I just really, really enjoy this. You know, you talked about, perspective and perception. And this is really an issue of size, and that things that we as humans perceive to be, large to us are really quite small to somebody else, particularly a giant. So my number 10 is Needle Drop. So Needle Drop is 1 red. It's only been printed once in Lorwyn. It's an instant. It says Needle Drop deals 1 damage to target creature or player that was dealt damage this turn, and you can draw a card. And the flavor text says, first it was plovers and mulldrifters, now it's knitting needles the size of javelins. So we would look at this and think these are like giant obelisks raining from the sky, but the flavor text reminding you that, like, it's just a knitting needle. And just to see, like, the way the giant is just kind of casually like, like it's just so fun. You can't take it too seriously. And I love the way that he conveys the size of the dragon over the cliff with the beautiful sky, the tree in the background being dwarfed by this giant, and then the needle. It's just so good.
He looks like Tigtone a little bit.
I remember that.
Remember Tigtone?
Oh yeah.
Remember events.
I've got a Tigtone playmat. Yeah, I love this card so much. I played this in a Pyromancer's Swath deck that I affectionately refer to as Disco Inferno. But yeah, being a burn spell that can replace itself, it's super cheap, it adds to your storm count. I love this card.
Yeah, there was a point in time where if you were at an event and you just, like, looked at a Channel Fireball person weird, they would throw a Tig-Tone flame at you. You'd be like, ah! They're just coming from everywhere.
I've
It
got
was like
one
the
in a stack
absolutely
over
nobody
there somewhere.
meme. Yeah. That meme of like nobody, absolutely nobody,
colon.
CFB Tig-Tone.
Tig-Tone? Can I? You're playing in a draft. Here, have a Tig-Tone flame at you.
I think
Please,
there's
no.
a season
Please.
2 coming.
I believe so.
my
I believe it was, renewed. So there you go. All right. So for my number 10 here, we're all clear. We're all clear. We don't want, the damsels in distress. We don't want overtly sort of gross, But every once in a while, can we bring the sexy back? Can we do a little Timberlake? It's okay. Every once in a while, it can be cool because take a look at Archangel of Strife. That is one powerful, sexy angel right there. That's some good. And the whole, like the way he sort of, the art he puts into it and the glow of the feathers and the background's incredible, and there's a booty. It's okay.
Right.
I'm here. I look 2 white, 5 generic mana. It's a big creature. 7 mana for a 6/6 flyer. It's a rare angel from Commander Anthology, originally from Commander 2011. As it enters the battlefield, each player chooses war or peace. Creatures controlled by players who choose war get +3/+0, and creatures controlled by player who chose peace get +0/+3. So it's cool, it's dynamic, it's neat, and it's Wizards is sometimes just like goes out of their way to be like, nope. Yeah, I saw a butt. I saw some cleavage. You get out of here. And I'm like,
well,
okay.
I think that there's a lot more context to the conversation than that. But I will say, in your defense, though, she does appear to be suitably armored, where she does appear to be corseted. But you do get the impression that these boots could really deflect blows, or that this armor could deflect blows. I think the issue that comes up often with that, which is a little bit too big for this episode, is that it's usually just like a Kleenex.
Right. There's a lot of nuance I'm missing out here.
And so it's just but you could really, but this is a believable. You could believe that this Archangel would be on the battlefield and that this look would suit her, as opposed to her wearing 2 Band-Aids and a cork and leading an army. That's never going to happen. And so you buy this. This is believable.
And I will say that historically, Roman and Greek armies did oftentimes go into battle pantsless. Yeah. Because you from the waist to the knees, you want to have the most range of motion. They'd be armored, with their gladiator sandals up to the knees. They'd be armored in their upper portions, but they would be exposed in, the cash and prizes, because you want to have the most range of motion there. So theoretically, this could be somewhat historically accurate. That's not I don't think that was the argument we were doing when we were making Archangel of Strife. The other thing about this is that the cloth, the billowing cape behind cool. has so much, folds
depth
are difficult. Yeah. And this is just, it looks like a Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, I like the colors. You can see rainbow hues in her feathers and her wings, the sunlight, really bringing out the armor. Yeah, this is a beautiful piece.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on here to number 9. Aaron, what you got?
So we're going to Kamigawa, Evan. This one's for you. So this is a card that is occasionally seen sideboard play in Modern. I brought this in. There are just some formats where there's a lot of -1/-1s hanging out. This is a really great, efficient way to deal with it. And the art is just bananas. My number 9 is Knight of Souls Betrayal. So Knight of Souls Betrayal is 2 colorless and 2 black. It is a legendary enchantment. And it's very simple. It just says all creatures get -1/-1. But this art is just bananas, where, it appears to be like my perception of this, and I haven't been able to zoom into this too closely, is I get the feeling that there's almost like a really screwed up merry-go-round of like there's this thing in the middle, everything's kind of spinning around it, and you have these wild images that you can only see in Kamigawa with the kami and people being agonized and in terror. And I just love this so much, and just picking out all the little details and the way the ground works with you can see the shadow of what's being done and the background and the greens and the blues and the darkness. It's just so packed with things, and I love it.
Yeah, the spirit's there, and the focus there on the middle. The guy,
yes.
What's there holding her head? What the kitsune? Kitsune. That's right. The kitsune holding his head.
Yep.
Right there. Yeah, super cool card. Honestly, was worth like $5-6, I recall, but then they reprinted it in Iconic Masters, and now it's 70 cents. So it's affordable. That's
Is that
fine.
a beholder floating in the background?
It looks very similar. Go ahead.
I just downloaded the PNG, and it just looks like, if anything, it looks more like a Simic Swallower. It's just this sort of floating mouth with like a head inside of it, and you see masks floating around.
You remember Doomgape, that creature?
Yep. Yeah.
Doomgape.
It reminds me of Doomgape.
Yeah, so you see 4 different people here all kind of falling apart or trying to hold on to themselves as everything is being, whipped around. It's just gorgeous. And also Doomgape. great insult. Like, if there's someone you don't like, be like, I
Listen,
didn't ask you, Doomgape. Yeah, just...
That's pretty good. I like that. All right.
Close your Doomgape.
You left your Doomgape open.
Stupid.
Ruben, what's your number 9?
Greg Staples, we talk about depth, we talk about color, we talk about texture, and we talk about humor. And his pieces are like, they make you smile every time you see them. Some of them are laugh out loud funny. And one of them that has always stuck out to me as a actual chuckle every time I see it is Kithkin Greatheart. Kithkin Greatheart's a colorless and a white for a 2/1 Kithkin soldier. As long as you control a giant, Kithkin Greatheart gets +1/+1 and has first strike. The art tells such a story.
It really does.
It's so funny, and it does exactly what the card does, and the flavor text tells the story too. Sometimes a curious giant singles out a little one to follow for a few days, never realizing the effect it will have on the little one's life.
Aww.
And you've seen this movie before, where it's like, yeah, come back here and tell me that, and then they slow turn around and there's like a big gang of angry people, and that's what's happening in this art. It's so good.
It's amazing when you can tell like the entire tale in just a snapshot. Like, you know exactly what happened in some form or fashion, and that is brilliant. Absolutely terrific piece. All right. Let's move on here to my number 9. Let me get yours officially in the spreadsheet here real quick. For my number 9 here, this is one of my favorites in that it was very iconic for the time. This was, oops, you're dead. Because when Wizards started sort of pushing the X spells, and this was back in Ravnica or whatever, but when they began pushing it back then, and they were like, look, what if we just gave you a fireball that you can't stop? And they were like, oh, P.S. Demon Fire you. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Demon Fire showed up. Super cool with the shaman with the hands up, and it's like the fire's coming to get you. You know it's coming to get you. Mm-hmm. Demon Fire's a red and X for a rare sorcery, originally showed up in Dissension. Demon Fire deals X damage to target creature or player. If a creature dealt damage this way, it would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. And Hellbent, if you have no cards in hand, it can't be countered by spells or abilities, and the damage cannot be prevented. It was good. It was good, clean magic back in the day.
Yeah.
Count permanents, you're dead.
I love Hellbent. Hellbent is like maybe my favorite ability, because it rewards you for doing the things I'm doing already, which is dump a bunch of angry red things onto the board, get my hand empty. We have Robber of the Rich. We have other things that reward you for doing the things red wants to do anyway. And Demon Fire is really the poster child for this, which is like, look, I'm getting rid of all my resources. I don't want to get mana leaked. You know what I mean? So here we go.
I like that. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I love Hellbent, but unfortunately in my experience, I found it doesn't play well with Commander, where I have a Rakdos deck. I have a Rakdos Showstopper deck, and my first instinct was to go on Scryfall, look up every Rakdos card, and find a way to jam those babies in. And yeah, there are so many neat Hellbent decks. The problem is it really lends itself to more of an aggressive strategy. And in EDH, you want card advantage. Like, you don't want to have 0 cards in your hand in EDH, unless you're playing maybe CEDH. But it's a shame, because this is a card that I would otherwise just play, but I really feel like it's just better with Hellbent.
Yeah,
I like Heckbent.
Bottled Cloister specifically.
Yeah. remember Heckbent? That was
Heckbent's
cool.
good.
Heckbent.
Hazaret the Pervert has Heckbent.
That's right.
One or fewer cards is also good.
Because it keeps that sort of sense of mystery. You know what I mean? Do they have a trick? Do they have a little something? And so if all of the Hellbent cards were literally just, empty hand or 1 card, I think they would have all done so much better, because again, there's that sense of mystery that stops people from just going, I know you have nothing. Like, there is nothing.
There's also a bit of intimidation there, again, because card advantage has been so beaten into us that, having no cards is bad. It really plays into the recklessness of Rakdos just to see someone like... Yeah. And you're just like, oh. Yeah. Like, you just don't even care. Like, you're just putting it all on the table, and you're just here to do your thing. And I respect that.
I love it.
All right, let's move here to number 8. Aaron, what you got?
We're staying in Kamigawa, Evan. So we found a good thing, and we're going to run with it for a little while. So this is a card that reminds me of bosses from Final Fantasy, particularly early ones. I stopped playing Final Fantasy around 10. But in the earlier games, particularly in Final Fantasy 3 or 6, I felt like we had this thing where like we would find these bosses that were like a person like kind of tied to something and floating. And when I look at this card, this reminds me of that. So my number 8 is Nourishing Shoal. So Nourishing Shoal is X and 2 2 green. It's from Betrayers of Kamigawa. Instant Arcane. Remember Arcane, y'all?
Oh, yeah.
You may exile a green card with converted mana cost X from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost, and you gain X life. So this was really big most recently in the Grishel brand decks, which are essentially down now that Simian Spirit Guide has been banned. Pour one out for that card. I think this also saw play in the Neo brand decks as well. But, you know, when I think of this, I think of those sort of Genova-type bosses where it's like you have this sort of hanging, you know, person strapped to like this giant amorphous mass of something, and then that's the boss that you have to fight. And then you have the just this like a spiral of fish, like just fish kind of running in, and just so uniquely Kamigawa and so ridiculous but beautiful. And I just really another one of those cards I can really get lost in, and just it appears to be almost underwater, like sort of green, just beautiful murkiness and whatever she's strapped to, and just gorgeous card.
Slams fist on table, more koi fish in Magic art. I also love this color palette, which you see on like the Art for Abundance, for example, where you have this like burnt orange fall color intermixed with this sort of not really dark, but like a little bit sad green that reminds you of late spring. And that sort of combination is so warm and so mono green of a combination, and Nourishing Shoal does it perfectly.
It's nice that there was a shoal that, I mean, I don't know if every single shoal saw a ton of play, but I remember when, you know, living through the release of Betrayers of Kamigawa, this was a punchline. This was like, look what they did to green. You know, look at the green legendary dragon from Champions. Look at the green, the shoal. This is trash, completely unplayable, yada yada. But later it turns out to be exactly what you need it to be, because free spells are free spells. Yeah, and those are always pretty sick. In one
All
way or
5
another.
of the shoals at one point in their in their lifespan saw some amount of competitive play.
There you go. Ruben, what's number 8?
So Greg Staples is very good at doing art that explains what the card does. You can read the card and like, I can't really conceptualize what that looks like. But you look at the art for Pentavis, and you're like, oh, I get it now. I see how that effect of that creature translates to what a thing like that would look like. Pentavis is a 7-mana artifact creature construct, originally from Mirrodin, reprinted a couple times. It enters the battlefield with 5+1/+1 counters on it, because it's a 0/0. You pay a colorless and remove a counter to make a 1/1 colorless Pentavite, creature token with flying. And you can sacrifice a Pentavite to put a +1/+1 counter back on Pentavis. So you see this sort of roly-poly bug robot, and you see these little pods taking off from it and floating away, and you can conceptualize that those can float back and leave again. It's sort of like a carrier from StarCraft 2. You like can figure, like I can grok this concept.
Right, and
looking at the art.
Yeah, you can see the token really nice.
As well, yeah.
Yeah, you're like,
the Tron token.
Yeah, you can see the Pentavite token itself, sort of how it would like, snap in there where it's supposed to go and whatnot. And like, that's really cool. Like, this is certainly a way to explain what is going on in a way that the art director really nailed, I think. So, all right, cool. Let's move on here to my number 8. This is one of my favorite cards from way back in the day. So for my number 8, this was an absolute favorite of mine from way back in the day. I mean, way back in the day. Like some of the first decks I ever got to play was using this card plus Armageddon, which got you the, Ernum Gin name, so you could blow up the world and not worry about giving your opponent's creatures Forest Walk. Now, this, in particular version of Ernum Gin, is not, the OG from Arabian Nights. This is the new version from Judgment, and so, putting this sort of back into Standard at the time was, a big deal. It did absolutely nothing, but it's fine. It was a big deal at the time, because they're like, this used to be, the Mac Daddy creature. It's not anymore, because Ernum Gin...
Forest Walk.
I did. About to say it again here in a second. A green and 3 generic mana for a 4/5. Oh my god, a 4-mana 4/5 in 90s, Will.
That's a rate.
Well, it's an uncommon Gin. At the beginning of your upkeep, target non-wall creature an opponent controls gains Forest Walk until your next upkeep. That's what you had to do. You have to give them a free attacker.
And what was the name of this card? I think I missed it.
Ernum Gin.
Oh, okay. So this is Ernum. Okay.
This is Ernum from Ernum Gin.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And of course, if you Armageddon, you don't have any forests. Ha ha. Look at my
Got
my
him.
4/5 combining with my way to destroy all the lands, as if you couldn't just win with any creature at that point.
At the time, this is where you have weird conversations about Zurin Orb. You know, it's like, well, if I got my Zurin Orb, I'll eat my forests. Like,
Ernum Gin can attack past a Sarah Angel and a Sengir Vampire. That is no joke, people.
That was big talk back then.
Tangle with your air elemental.
Get you some. All right. Let's move on here to number 7. Ruben, what you got?
My number 7 is a very strange card. It will never be reprinted. Nobody's asking for this card ever again. It references an ability that no one cares about. But the art is so interesting and different than anything I've seen on any other art that I just had to talk about Parallax Inhibitor. Parallax Inhibitor is a 2 colorless mana artifact rare. Sorry.
Oh,
Jesus.
Goodness.
Put some spec on that name.
Whoa.
It was bad for an uncommon, let alone a rare. Pay a colorless, tap, and sacrifice Parallax Inhibitor. Put a fade counter on each permanent with fading you control.
Wow.
This might as well be on the reserve list. I don't think I've ever seen this card in my life.
This card is so stupid. So it would let your fading creatures and your fading permanents stay around for an extra turn.
Right.
For the low cost of 3 colorless mana and a card. Yeah, not great. But the art is super interesting. You have this dude who is like fading into, the Thanos snap, and the inhibitor is like staving it off just a little bit so that the guy can stay around just a little bit longer.
Okay, you know what this reminds me of? This is a reference like 2 of you will understand, but it's fine. One of the first, I think 3 or 4 episodes of Voyager, there was this episode where they discovered a planet that had been destroyed by a bomb of some kind. And so they go back in time to try to figure out what happened. And in order to bring them back, they have to set up this device. It has like a beam that like opens the portal. And like, this is what that reminds me of. It's just that episode and that beam. Somebody in the comments, don't leave me hanging, but
that story's way more interesting than whatever's going on with this card.
Literally
they fixed it.
Tens of you.
I know,
and then
right?
the way that time works, it was Voyager that actually caused the bomb to go off, even though they weren't there because of timey-wimey.
Spoilers.
So timey-wimey.
It's like a 20-year-old show. If you haven't seen it by now, I can't help you.
Well, it's been spoiled, so who cares? I mean, they fixed this mechanic with Vanishing. When you remove the last counter, the creature should go away. Blastoderm staying on the board was always weird, and this fixes
counts
that.
up as opposed to counting down,
right?
Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So let's. My number 7 is higher on someone else's list, and that's okay because it's dope. Aaron, what's number 7?
My number 7, to me, it doesn't seem to be that powerful, but it has seen play in the right conditions. This was, and always seems to come back up. This is a card that we think we've seen the last of, and then some strategy comes back that makes it popular again. We saw this a lot during Eldrazi Winter, actually, and then all of a sudden Phoenix decks became good, and then Phyrexian mana, not having to pay for things was all the rage. And sometimes, again, like I mentioned with Night of Soul's Betrayal, sometimes you just find yourself in a meta where the most popular decks have a lot of 1 toughness creatures, or where your opponent is likely to get very, very low in life, and you can just sort of finish them off with this card. My number 7 is Gutshot. So Gutshot is 1 Phyrexian mana for red mana. It's from New Phyrexia. So you can either pay 1 red or 2 life for the spell. It's an instant. And Gutshot deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So this is very simple, very effective. But you have prowess decks now with Monastery Swift Sphere, Soul Scar Mage. And this is a free prowess, along with being able to do damage. Stormwing Entity is a card. This can make it easier to cast your Stormwing entities. If you're playing anything like the Phoenix decks, you had to get that critical mass of sorceries to flip your thing in the ice, to get your Arclight Phoenixes back. And just occasionally you'll just find this in certain decks where they know specifically what they need to answer. That thing happens to have 1 toughness and just get it out of here.
This was a main deck card in the blue-white Delver meta.
Oh, yeah.
Because your opponent plays a Delver and you're on the draw, you kill the Delver. That's all you need to do.
And the art is just brutal. You have this like pincher looking thing that is like just goring somebody with this spear or this object. When I first saw this, I thought the person was being like pulled onto it. Like, it's just a gruesome card.
Oh yeah, you can see like the Phyrexian monster there with its brain like out exposed or whatever, ramming that thing through. The power in this card. It's just fantastic.
I love me. I mean, anything that's free is going to see play. Much less if it can deal with like if you're tapped out against Infect, Still got a Gutshot. Like, this is always a card you got to keep in mind.
Phyrexian mana, as much as I enjoyed it as a spike, is not a fair mechanic.
It's not good.
It's not great. All right, let's move on here to number 6. Ruben, what you got?
You never forget your first. And my first was, my first official preview card, was Slither Head.
Yep.
And it's just always been near and dear to my heart. Slither Head is a Golgari mana, either a black or a green, for a 1/1 plant zombie, uncommon from Return to Ravnica with Scavenge 0, which means you pay 0 and you exile this card from your graveyard, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to this card's power on target creature, scavenge only as a sorcery. Scavenge was the Golgari keyword from Return to Ravnica. Not the best keyword that we could have asked for Golgari. But Slitherhead, I think, saw a little bit of play. It was cheap. Again, paying 0 for something means that you can do stuff. It was both black and green, which is relevant in some cases for the older formats. And it's cute. Look at him. He's a little like, it's like a hermit crab, except for instead of a shell, it's a skull, and instead of a crab, it's an octopus.
Okay, so I am full of TV and movie references today, so I apologize. This reminds me of, did you ever see the movie The Faculty?
Yes.
Okay. You know when Famke Janssen gets thrown through the car and then she ends up just being a head with some tentacles just sliding across the street? That's what this reminds me of.
Sure.
That's exactly right. Yeah, this thing is super creepy, and I'm sorry that Scavenge is not busted in half like Dredge was. It's better this way.
There had to have been a happy medium between like completely unplayable and Dredge, and they just didn't. The pendulum just swung too far. Like they were just so scared.
Oh yeah, and if you look at the Scavenge cards that they have, like they're all scared to death that this might be a decent mechanic.
Good one. Like I could understand if they gave us one, and then they were like, "You got your one." They were
gave us
all
Veryl's
terrible.
The Scar Stripes.
Yeah, Veryl's was a thing late in standard.
Yeah, which wasn't even a scavenge card. It was good because of other reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally
it was
different.
more like Abzan aristocrats. Yeah.
It's just it's funny to me because back at that time they were very afraid, I think, of just sort of breaking something in half from the graveyard. So they're like, okay, it's fine. All right, Aaron, what's number 6?
My number 6 is, Ruben, you mentioned you never forget your first. This was my first modern deck. I love to talk about this, and it is seeing a bit of a resurgence, which is funny because one of the key pieces was recently banned in Simian Spirit Guide, and yet Living End is putting up results, y'all. It's top 8ing things again. We have this lovely 3/4 color version now with Ardent Plea and Force of Negation, and we are living our best life. So Living End was originally printed in Time Spiral. It's a sorcery with Suspend 3. 2 and 2 black, so you can, pay 4 and suspend this if you want to. Or you can also we'll get to that in a minute. And then each player exiles all creature cards from their graveyard, then sacrifices all creatures they control, and then puts all cards they exile this way onto the battlefield. So the most common way to use this card is with cascade spells. So you run cards like Demonic Dread, Violent Outburst, which costs 3 mana, and so you flip your deck over, and you build your deck in such a way to where the only thing that costs less than 3 is going to be Living End. And so then you can get Living End for free. And you can also do this at instant speed thanks to Violent Outburst. And so with Simian Spirit Guide, you have these really unpredictable turns of like, do they have it? And you could sometimes even get it off on turn 2. Really great in a format that's dominated by creatures. And this is just a really fabulous card. Cascade coming back into the limelight thanks to Valky. People rediscovering how busted Cascade is. But this is my first Living End. This is my first modern deck. This is my first taste of broken things. You pair this with a bunch of cyclers, Fulminator mages, and you have a really, really good time.
Deadeye Minotaur and something Carabid.
Well, now the double face cards, because
Monsters
they're not
Carabid.
spells, and so you can just cascade past them. But they can also be useful. Like I saw somebody the other day, Valakut's Awakening, because if you happen to draw your Living Ends, just whoop, 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 and then draw new cards, and good stuff.
This, of course, is harkening back to Living Death. The whole cycle of the free suspend cards all harken back to super powerful old spells and Living Death. I mean, the art has a lot to live up to because the art to Living Death was so indelible.
Right.
And this does it. You get the feeling of the zombie apocalypse coming.
Yeah, this thing is really coming out of the ground to come get you, which is awesome. And it's fantastic to see how all of these different type of spells, I guess the balance one hasn't really been
I mean, there's restore balance in Modern.
There's a little bit of restore balance here and there. I mean, it's a hell of an effect.
They all I mean, obviously Hypergenesis is banned.
Sure.
And then
Ancestral Vision was great.
The problem with restore balance is it doesn't necessarily win you the game, though.
Right,
like, it's annoying. Like, you can definitely like really set your opponent back a while, but you're still not
Wheel of Fate.
Right. I mean, like, you have no offense, though. Like, you've kept them off base, but how do you plan on winning this thing? Whereas this is a definitive, like, here's 19 power.
And
some
also
of this
wrath your board.
Right. Some of this has flying, some of this has swamp walk. You've got a turn. And oh, by the way, if I have to, I can cast this crappy common from Alara, make this thing not be able to block.
And of course,
and win.
Right. And of course, the most famous of all of those was Lotus Bloom, which is also the Buy a Box promo for Time Spiral Remastered, and was the it was the pre-release promo for Time Spiral. Right. And it's funny because at the time, I was talking to R&D, and they said that while like Lotus Bloom was like the actual winner from the set in terms of like big tournament impact at the time, they were scared to death of Ancestral Visions. They're like, we think that number is like a turn too low and is way too good for the rate. And it ended up being very, very good, obviously. But, you know, it was funny to me that they didn't really see that much in Lotus Bloom, whereas it was the big winner. All right, let's move on here to my number 6. I like, sort of when you see sort of a big extreme in Magic, sometimes good, sometimes bad, when we're talking about the previous seasons of Strixhaven. But this image in particular, I love because, you can certainly feel what it's like to be a person on Mirrodin who looks up, and God help you if you see an arachnoid right there. Is gigantic. It is huge. Like the size, the scale, the scope, the really cool sort of green color coming up and out and around the body of the thing. Arachnoid is 6 generic mana for an uncommon originally from Fifth Dawn. It was an artifact creature spider. It's a 2/6 and it has reach. They actually renamed this one as Reach and not just make blocks that flying. So
this looks like the War of the Worlds monsters from the Tom Cruise War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
And again, scale, right? Like this one doesn't really have definitive background pieces. This one doesn't have even definitive mostly anything, but you can feel the massiveness.
Right. They're like, this booty you're going to be.
That's right.
Big booty.
Look at that. Look at that cephalothorax.
Working it.
Oh my God. What you gonna do with all that Spinneret?
Hey.
Okay.
Spinneret,
nice.
cut it up one time.
So we want to hear to number 5. Ruben, what's your number 5?
I love it when an artist flexes by showing you how good they are at portraiture. We don't get a lot tells in Magic the Gathering, close-up faces. And one of the earliest I can remember of being like, wow, this tells a story in Magic the Gathering while kind of just being a picture of a person is Gadot Teague.
Oh, yeah.
Gadot Teague is a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary creature, Kithkin Advisor. Non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater can't be cast, and non-creature spells with X in their mana costs can't be cast. So obviously Gadot Teague, very powerful card against, Green Sun Zeniths and Cryptic Commands. But I look at this art and I look at the face, and you can tell that this, small person who the Kithkin are kind of jokey, kind of funny. But this one, the leader of the Kithkin, you can tell there's wisdom, there's experience, there's something else happening in this art.
Yeah, he's seen some stuff. He's there. He's seen some giants. He's seen some needles. He knows what's up. I mean, no, but the sort of the raw aging, of this character, you can definitely tell there's sort of, it's kind of been worn down over the years type stuff. But clearly like the voice you would go to for advice as a Kithkin, which is cool. All right. Aaron, what's number 5?
So I obviously have a great appreciation for cards that are powerful enough to be banned, and now we're starting to get into the, banned section and cards that are seeing play in older format section. And I was fortunate enough to have not really played a lot of competitive Magic when this banning came down, and I'm glad that I wasn't, because I would not have had the patience to see this through. This is one of those cards that wasn't really banned because of how powerful it was, but just because of the impact that it had on the game. Kind of like Sensei's Divining Top, where it just drew out the game. I seem to recall a story about Brian Kibler that was like, went to the bathroom 20 minutes later and his opponent was still going. And that was not unusual, and it's just ultimately bad for the game. My number 5 is Second Sunrise. Yep. So Second Sunrise is 1 colorless and 2 white. It's an instant from Mirrodin. Each player returns to play all artifact, creature, enchantment, and land cards that were put into their graveyard from play this turn. And so you had this really convoluted, annoying artifact deck that played, Pyrite Spellbomb, you played Lotuses, you played, maybe Chromatic Stars, but just the point is you were playing a bunch of crappy artifacts. You would make kind of mana, you would throw things at people, and then you would cast this and do it all over again. And it just led to really, really obnoxiously long games. And just, this is one of those cards that they didn't ban for being powerful, but just because of the negative impact that it had on the game as a whole.
This is my number 7.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
The deck was affectionately or derisively called Eggs.
Eggs, yeah.
Because they were named after the Eggs cycle from Odyssey, which would allow you to sacrifice them to draw a card and make some mana, and so you'd have Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star, Conjurer's Bauble, lots of other baubles of various kinds. You'd bring them all back with Second Sunrise, you draw more cards, you draw another Second Sunrise, etc., etc. Stanislav Sivka won a Pro Tour, the Jund Modern Pro Tour, Pro Tour Seattle, thanks to a good matchup against Jund, because, sure, make me discard a bunch of stuff, draw card, draw 6 more cards, and here we go.
Yep. Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star, Conjurer's Bauble, Elsewhere Flask, how about that card? Lotus Bloom, which Evan just talked about, Reshape, Pyrite Spellbomb. Yeah, just a painful deck to have to play against.
It's really bad. But for the artwork itself, though, I'm always sort of astounded about artwork that can almost make you squint. You're trying to look at it, you're like, oh, it's so bright right there, but it's not bright. It's they're playing with the light levels. It's it's just the color white on your screen, but somehow it really sort of heightens that experience. And Second Sunrise is just like the perfect design of something's going to break. Not now. It didn't happen immediately. It took years. And then wait a minute, this stupid card with these other stupid cards that are all stupid cheap that do stupid little things just bring a bunch of stupidity. And here we are.
It's bright and you can feel it. Like you can feel the warmth. Like you can feel like you are on the battlefield with this person. You can feel how hot it is. You can understand why they're exhausted. You can see like the sinew in their muscles, which makes me think they might be a little bit dehydrated or they might have been fighting for a long time. The level of detail with this and the ability to feel what you're seeing is really, really prevalent here.
You can tell that this isn't just a sunrise. You can tell that this is a sunrise after a long, long battle.
Yeah.
So for my number 5 here, when I can only imagine being a Magic artist, and not just being a Magic artist and sort of having that type of pressure to perform or whatever, but not only that, like, hey, we want you to make a card that is already a card, a new version of an existing card. So you have to kind of live up or hopefully excel past the original version. And this version came off so incredibly well to replace an iconic card that was very well known. It came off so well. Wizards rode this image just on through. They rode it through 9th edition when it first showed up. They rode it through 10th edition. It was all over products and stuff everywhere. The Hypnotic Spectre that Greg Staples did was just an absolute masterclass in, form, the function, like the wings, the moons there, and the lighting, and it's epic. It's freaking epic. This is a creature you need to be aware of and or afraid of. If you don't know, Hypnotic Spectre is 2 black and a generic mana for a 2/2 rare Spectre, originally from Alpha. It has flying, and whenever it deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card at random, which Wizards really kind of hates doing. So that's why we don't see it anymore.
Yeah. The art style, I obviously love old art as much as anybody else. Obviously I play vintage and I've thought about playing old school, but, the art from long ago doesn't necessarily translate well. There are some things that just aren't timeless, or maybe they are timeless, but they just don't age well, I guess you could say. And, that style would never work in modern pieces, but the style right here absolutely does. You have the clouds parting to show the moon. You have the dragon perched up on this lone rock. You have the rider on their back. You have the scale of the wings and how big they are. Just how hideous this thing is. Like it's kind of emaciated, almost bird-like.
Look at its hands. It's
it just adds some really, and just how big the feet are compared to everything else. And, there are so many other details that while the original is fine and obviously respected, this adds just so many more layers to the card and very, very terrifying.
My most indelible memory of this art of Hypnotic Spectre is that this art is the version that was in Uri Peleg's Worlds winning deck. I remember listening into a conversation with Patrick Chapin and the folks that he was playtesting with for the finals, and they were deciding how Uri would sideboard. Most of them decided that that Uri would sideboard out the Hypnotic Spectre. And on the ultimate turn of the game, Uri plays this to chump block a Bogarden Hellkite to be able to swing back for lethal, and Patrick Chapin couldn't get rid of the 2/2 chump blocking flyer, and that was the ultimate decider of the match.
Wow.
Which is sort of, for some reason, that's always stuck out in my mind.
Oh, that's terrific. And I mean, this was, when they made Magic 2010, this was, the big reboot, the big, Magic's back, and we got rid of damage on the stack and all this other crap. And it's like, Hypnotic Spectre was front and center as like, this is classic Magic. Yeah. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be great. Yes, sometimes you want to get the land from them, but a lot of times it's just a cool card that represents a good threat that you got to get rid of. And there you go. So we move on here to number 4. Aaron, what you got?
My number 4 is a card that currently sees play in Legacy or has at various points. And we talked earlier about perspective, and we talked about how, particularly with Needle Drop, we take things that we think are quite large and in a giant's hands actually quite small. And this, for me, the thing that stands out about this is the angle. The way that you're looking at something from the side, you might be looking at it from the profile, you might be looking at it down, but this is the rare card where you're looking at it from the ground up, literally the ground. My number 4 is Buried Alive. So Buried Alive is 2 colorless and a white. It was originally printed in Weatherlight. This was another situation where Greg Staples was asked to do art that had already been done before. He did not do the original, but he did do the Odyssey version. It's a sorcery, and so search your library for up to 3 creature cards and put them into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. So this was really powerful at that time, to be able to put things specifically in your graveyard. Graveyards used to be sort of the naughty place, or the discard pile, as they were called when they first came out. You don't want to purposely put things in there. That's ludicrous until you do. And so the thing that's so great about this is you get to see the perspective of the person. And with the original Buried Alive, you're looking down at them. You're looking at this almost, quicksand looking material and the 3 or 4 heads kind of sticking out of it. This is the opposite, where you're seeing the person's hands trying to feverishly claw their way out of this grave that's being dug for them while they're alive. You see the people staring down at them. They're not offering any help. You see this happening on a dark, moody night. And this is perfect if you want to play anything like my Cathril deck, being able to go for exactly like Zatalpa, Acroma, and like something. Go at it. Yeah. Fabulous. This also saw a bit of a resurgence with Arclight Phoenix in Legacy, because you could go turn 1 Dark Ritual, whoop, 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 throw in your Phoenixes, and then just do some dumb things, and then suddenly you have Phoenixes. And so it's not for everybody, but in the decks that want it, it's tremendous.
It's also one of the, there's a bunch of artworks of Magic that can, give you very specific sort of feelings. Someone is claustrophobic. I can imagine they would hate this art. It just gives them all the wrong vibes. No, not the dirt coming flying too and everything.
Uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Greg Staples does just make you feel things.
Yeah.
With his art.
Ruben, what's number 4?
Speaking of making you feel things, I look at this art and I go, gross. I don't want to look at this anymore. It doesn't make me happy. I make I make the Elizabeth Olsen nose scrunch of I'm not enjoying this. Before we had Kianos of Meletis and what is the Praetor? Atraxis?
Mm-hmm.
Atraxa, that's the one. We didn't have 4-color legends.
Right.
And we didn't really have a way to refer to the 4-color combinations. We had the wedges, and we had the guilds, and we had the shards, but we didn't have ways to refer to the 4 colors. And oftentimes, Magic insiders would say, oh, that 4-color combination is the Dune Brood. That one's the Glint Eye. That one's the Yortiller. And that one is the Witch Maw, because they were named after the Nephilims.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Witch Maw Nephilim makes me uncomfortable. It's a green, a white, a blue, and a black for a 1/1 Nephilim. When you cast a spell, you may put 2 +1/+1 counters on Witch Maw Nephilim. Whenever Witch Maw Nephilim attacks, it gains trample until end of turn if its power is 10 or greater. Feel free to move on as quickly as you need to, because I don't want to look at this art.
There's so much
anymore.
teeth. There's a wetness there.
Gross hair. The moistness.
You know what this reminds me of.
Hey, this is a family show.
Please.
I'm not going to say it,
There's
the
hairs,
teeth, the tongue,
folds,
the glistening.
folds.
It's
I don't
know what the head thing is or the face thing right there is going on. I don't know.
But it takes a special kind of artist to make you feel something, right? You watch a certain actor playing a certain character and you go, I hate that person so much. But they're making you feel something. And this art certainly makes me feel something.
There you go. So for my number 4, I definitely feel some of this one. This is my Kamigawa contribution for my top 10 list, which I really enjoyed a lot. This piece in particular, for me, just like, you're kind of going through, and the piece stood out as like, wow, that's incredible. It's sort of, it's basically iconic. I've seen this in different places. They put this image in different places. And it's just like a BA character. Like how BA can you be when you're Opal Eye Konda's Yojimbo? That guy looks amazing. For 2 white and generic mana, it's a 1/4 rare legendary Fox Samurai. Yeah, there were Fox Samurais. I want them back. It had Bushido 1 and Defender. This creature can attack. Of course, tap : the next time a source of your choice would deal damage this turn, that damage is dealt to Opal Eye Konda's Yojimbo instead. And for a white and generic mana : prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to Opal Eye this turn. They don't make cards like this because this is a giant nightmare on the battlefield.
Okay, but can we talk about
moving?
Can we talk about the pecs though?
I mean, those pecs.
Those pecs are a 3-course meal, and you see like a little the average here. Am I a furry? Is this happening?
I mean,
am I attracted to a Fox Samurai?
That Fox Samurai got it going on.
Hat.
What does the fox say? Call me. That's
the
what it
Gasa
says.
that this Yojimbo is wearing is what the name of that. It's a Ronin Gasa.
This is just one of the most striking cards of the set. I'm just like,
spectacular.
Whoa, it's so fantastic.
Also, if you've never seen the movie Yojimbo, it is a absolute classic of Japanese samurai films. It's like maybe the most famous, probably second most famous of the Akira Kurosawa movies. If you are a fan of The Mandalorian, go back and watch Yojimbo. If you're a fan of Westerns, go watch Yojimbo. It's great. This art, I mean, wow.
Wow. All right, let's move to number 3. Aaron, what's your number 3? Yeah.
So my
Aaron,
number 3,
please.
I just... I'm not made of wood, Ruben. I'm not made of wood.
Not yet.
Family
show. I just recently learned that my number 3. See, I don't even know my numbers anymore. Where did it? My number 3. I just recently learned that my number 3 is part of a cycle, which is funny.
Flustered. I'm sorry.
Not Flusterstorm though. I just recently learned that my number 3 is part of a cycle, which is funny because I've been casting my number 3 for a very, very long time. It's a really great answer to just problematic permanence. Any combo deck worth their salt that is able to play blue mana is going to run this, such as your Storm decks, your Modern Ad Nauseam decks, because you just don't know what they're going to bring in against you, and you just want a really nice, clean answer that will deal with everything and can also be used to deal with aggressive decks sometimes. If you're running into a deck that runs a lot of the same name creatures, or especially a token deck, you can also just get them with this and buy yourself some time to do what you need to do. My number 3 is Echoing Truth. Echoing Truth is 1 colorless and a blue, originally printed in dark steel. It is an instant. Return target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent to their owner's hand. So, like I said, Modern Ad Nauseam, Storm, both Modern and Legacy really like to run this card. So I think sometimes even in Vintage, maybe the Blue Belcher decks like to run this too. Just takes care of anything you need that could possibly get in the way, whether it be Thalia, Damping Sphere, Leyline of Sanctity, whatever it is that ails you, this card takes care of it.
Yeah, your opponent keeps a hand with 3 Leyline of the Voids. Nice try, idiot. If you can get rid of a bunch of, beast tokens or whatever is ailing you. If somebody goes empty the Warren's Goblin Bushwhacker, guess what? They all go back and they all disappear forever.
Yep.
I mean,
Greg Staples actually illustrated all 5 of the cards in this cycle.
Yeah.
And Echoing Decay occasionally sees play.
Echoing Decay was huge back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was also saw play. Echoing Courage, I seem to recall there was a deck that ran Echoing Courage that made a bunch of Saproling tokens.
I know Echoing Calm saw some sideboard play, and they're it's Hug from Jesus, destroy your opponent's lands with Echoing Ruin. That was right there. You're like, oh, you're all Seat of the Synod. Okay, thanks. Yeah. That was fun times. All right. What is your number 3, Ruben?
My number 3 is a card that when I was making this list, I was like, this card has to be on my list because for me, my first real experience with owning Magic cards was I bought a long box, 1,000 count box of assorted commons and uncommons when I was 12. And in this box were a lot of commons from Urza's Legacy. And I probably had 20 copies of this card. And for some reason, it always stuck out to me. It was like a very unique art. I'm not sure I've ever really cast this card very much, but I look at Angelic Curator, and it just reminds me of my own personal history with Magic the Gathering.
Great piece.
Angelic Curator is a colorless and a white. Now it's an angel spirit. Was a summon spirit. It's a common from Urza's Legacy. It has flying and protection from artifacts.
Wow, this must be some like his first stuff. Like
it was very early on in Greg Staples, and those
shadows
wings and the shadows and the lighting. It was just it's a gorgeous piece.
Yeah, early but super duper cool, like a lot of those are. So for my number 3 here, I, especially way back in the day, because this is originally showed up Morningtide. Back in the day, what would happen a lot of the time was I would see something that I thought was so cool, and I would want it to be good. I would desperately look and try and point out the combos of whatever it is I was looking at and being like, this card, it could be cool, because there's no way it can look this cool and not be like one of the best cards that's currently in Standard or whatever. It was weird, but I just could not help because I was so drawn to the sort of the magic hour look of Preeminent Captain. The way the light shimmers off the sword is just so freaking cool. Preeminent Captain is a white and 2 generic mana. It showed up twice in Morningtide and Magic 2015. It sucked both times. It's a rare from both of those sets. It's a Kithkin Soldier. It's a 2/2 that has first strike, and when it attacks, you may put a soldier creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. And I did good work with this in Limited and Changelings. That was super duper fun, but it just never went anywhere. A 3-mana 2/2 first strike is just ain't going to do it. I don't care what's going to happen if it takes a whole turn.
Do you know where this card saw play?
Where did it see play?
Legacy.
Oh my god.
There was a soldier stomping deck for about half a second.
Really?
Where you'd attack with this and put a Captain of the Watch into play, backed up with things like Trinisphere and Chalice of the Void.
Main deck suppression field.
Yep. Main deck suppression field.
Wow.
And
it's funny because it's funny because this is a card that has the makings. Like when you look at it, it should work. Like you're going, oh, there's got to be some really broken soldiers you could put on a play with this. And when you look at things that have happened since, where you look at Winona and Winona,
yeah.
You
should be because she's
Winona.
an icon. But what I'm saying is like you can see how like this has been refined. You can see how this has been refined and tuned to where this is really good now, where they just had to tweak a couple of knobs to get it right. But yeah, I was one of those people that when I first saw this, in a pre-release for 2015, I was like, oh my goodness. And, I would see it at F&M and it was always something I dreaded running into. And you're right, it just never took off.
You look at this and you're like, oh man, this is like a goblin lackey for soldiers.
Right.
The problem is that the big goblins, the gap between 1 and 5, there's like no good soldiers to put in with a 3-mana Preeminent Captain. So
and it's hard to get under the velvet rope at 3.
Yeah.
When you have a turn 1 goblin lackey, it's probably getting under there at 3.
And it has no impact when it enters the battlefield and stuff, which is tough. But again, this is one of those cards that from now until the end of time, whenever they make a changeling or a soldier, you can say, well, there's one way you can put them into play for free, and it's this guy. So, all right, let's move on here to our number 2. Ruben, what's your number 2?
Listen, my list is full of Kithkins because I love Kithkins. And I needed to have, in my head, this is like I don't know what it is about this card, but it gives me such a feeling of, oh, that's so cool. I want to learn more. All I want is to live where Mist Meadow Witch is living. I just want to be there with the baubles hanging from the trees, hanging out with this creepy grandma with no pupils, and just like
Girls, you creepy.
There.
You so creepy.
Mist Meadow Witch is a colorless and an Azorius mana, either a white or a blue, for a 1/1 Kithkin Wizard with an activated ability that says pay 2 mana plus a white and a blue, so 4 total. Exile target creature, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Wow. Not only is this art super cool, super dope, super creepy, super weird, but the effect, I love blinking things.
Yeah.
This was perfect. I like my first EDH deck was a blink deck, and Mist Meadow Witch came out and was like, it's exactly what I want to be doing and how I want to be doing it, and also it looks cool. I just love this card.
I had this in my Shroom deck when I first built it because obviously being able to blink Shroom is pretty great. Yeah. And so, you can play this defensively. You can also play this offensively because it says return at the beginning of the next end step. So, if you're trying to be aggressive and close out a game, this can help you do that. Obviously, it's great against tokens because those tokens don't come back. But, if you're running something with an ETB, it's great. And, I totally get you. And you don't have to tap it. This is a mana sink in Commander. So it's not unusual.
Save your team against Wraths, too.
Yeah, so it's not unusual to get 1 or even 2 activations out of this at a time.
Yeah, I mean, in doing stuff like, at the beginning of your end step or whatever, use the ability. So on my turn, my creatures aren't here and I can wrath and whatever, which was great. But like the artwork itself is just incredibly striking and kind of unsettling. I don't think is the right word. More like fascinating. No. Like, what is really happening here? God, I would love to see this animated, for example. That would be dope. Aaron, what's number 2?
Number 2 is another situation where Greg was asked to do his version of an iconic card. And I think he did a really, really good job. This card has seen play in Legacy since as far back as I can remember. And it's probably just one of the best discard spells you can play. My number 2 is Hymn to Turok. Hymn to Turok is 2 black, is originally printed in... We going all the way back here? Fallen Empires, where they had 4 different 5.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, 4,
they had 4
5.
different ones.
1, 2, 3, 4. I count 5. Oh, no, you're right. 4. Okay, 1, 2, I don't count 5. So 4 different. Remember when they used to do that? Remember when they used to make 4 different in the same set?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like set boosters.
Now they just print different Magic cards. Now they just print 3,000 Magic cards in a year.
Yeah.
And it's very simple. It's a sorcery, and it says target player discards 2 cards at random. And, when you're playing any sort of discard deck, at random is really where it's at. And it's very rare that they'll give you at random more than 1 card at this rate for 2 mana. Obviously, this is a nightmare for combo decks because your hands are so precious. And particularly in older formats, I feel like the combo decks that are out there mulligan pretty well. So you can afford to go down to 6, but that 6 is probably exactly what you need. And so having a hymn come along and just take that from you can be backbreaking. And, you also have a card like Shardless Agent that can cascade into this, which is like, whoop! And so it's very easy. Pox is a tier 1.5, tier 2 deck in Legacy. And so this can really just rain on your day. And I think Greg did a really great job of bringing a fresh take to this, where you have what appears to be worshippers worshiping this sort of tombstone. You see all of them kind of groveling down. You see the beautiful blues and purples here. It's dark without being as dark as the last 4 works. I feel like the last 4 are really beating you over the head with it.
Oh, yeah.
And this one is still beautiful and dark in a way the others weren't.
Yeah, this card is really sweet. And I mean, the raw power of Hymn to Turok is just absurd. I mean, they didn't really get near it until like Wrenchmind, and that had sort of like a safety valve. I mean, 2 mana for 2 cards is just not really seen these days. Skull Raid, you have to pay up front with, Foretold or whatever, because that raid is just dumb. And at random, I mean, I cannot tell you how many F&Ms that just got blown out back in the day because it's like, well, they got my land and my 1-drop, and I died.
Like, you go turn 1, Dark Ritual Hypnotic Spectre, turn 2, Hymn to Turok attack you.
Mm-hmm.
You have no hand anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you might, that game is over. Trivia question time.
Uh-oh.
Turok was the leader and the first high priest of the Order of the Ebon Hand.
Ooh,
oh, wow.
Very nice.
Yeah. Worshipped the Ebon Praetor, I guess. Which
then brings me to that
really
weird one with the bunny card and the dude in the bunny card.
Exactly right.
Yep, that's a creepy one. But yeah, this card was terrific, and yeah, thankfully banned in Pauper. Cool. We were to my number 2.
I didn't know that. I mean, it makes sense, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine how miserable Pauper would be?
I mean, you say that like it's not already miserable. Come on.
How much more miserable Pauper would be?
How much additional misery would be poured onto it, yes. So, for my number 2, these are the big heavy hitters here. We're at number 2. So, for my number 2, Wizards rode this image for a while. This was an iconic creature back in the day. This was a creature that, for all intents and purposes, even all the way back to Alpha, was like really high on the, what a creature could do for this mana cost. So they reprinted it, of course, many, many times. In 7th edition, when everything went ugly, they made a new version of it, and that was no good, even though they printed it again in 8th edition. But for 9th edition, man, they rode this image. You saw it everywhere. It was on the boxes, it was on the long boxes, it was on the Ultra Pro stuff. When you looked at 9th 9th edition and you saw the like utter epicness of Mahamodi Jin, of the Fat Modi. This thing is ridiculous. This card is a BA. It's going to let you know it. It's going to rule your limited games. This card was sweet and sick from way back in the day. Mahamodi Jin is 2 blue, 4 generic mana for a 5/6 rare Jin with flying. That's it. 6 mana, 5/6 flyer. But back in the day, these stats were unreal. These stats were way better than everything else.
5/6? You kidding me?
With evasion. But the Jin and the fists and like towering over in the clouds. I mean, they printed this thing everywhere. I saw it all over images, advertising, everything.
Speaking of pecs.
Hey,
look at that.
pecs for days.
And such a departure from the original. You know, when you look at the first one done by Dan Fraser, the Jin almost looks remorseful. Well, of course he is. You know, he's in a lamp and he can really only come out when someone wishes him to. And so he looks kind of bummed, or he's like, yeah, I'm here. What do you want? And, you know, the Greg Staples version is really like kind of empowered of like, raw. Just very, very, very nice difference there.
Yeah. The first Mahamodi Jin reminds me of the genie from Aladdin. This Mahamodi Jin reminds me of when Jafar gets the lamp.
Yeah.
Unlimited power.
Unlimited power. Leaving space. And this is a really great one.
When it's just like that hair whip and just the eyes just right there. I mean, this is
scale palm trees. We don't get scale palm trees that much.
It's true. I like scale palm trees. Well, let's move on here to our number 1. It appears that we have samesies on number 1 for Ruben and I. So, Aaron, what is your number 1?
So my number 1 is a seemingly innocuous little card that does one thing and does that thing very, very well. This card does not die. This card does not stay down. This card always comes back. And when paired with Bazaar of Baghdad, it really generates you a really neat form of card advantage and is seeing play a little bit recently in the Horror Vine deck. When paired with Krovikan Horror, this is another card that you can discard to Bazaar and then get back again, so you can discard things like this and then keep the cards you want. My number 1 is Squee Goblin Nabob. So Squee Goblin Nabob, this is the 10th edition version, is 2 colorless and a red. Legendary creature Goblin, 1 power, 1 toughness. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return Squee from your graveyard to your hand. And so, like I said, if you're playing with Bazaar of Baghdad, draw 2, discard 3 can be a bit of a bummer. But when you're playing with Squee, Bazaar does something other than being a dredge engine. It's a card advantage engine. And so you are able to keep the gas that you're drawing, like Force of Vigor, Mindbreak Trap, Sickening Shoal, discard this, and then get them back on your upkeep. So you have more cards to keep feeding to Bazaar, and your opponents just really can't keep up with you. And then in the meantime, you're discarding your Blood Gas, you're discarding your Prized Amalgams, you're casting Hollow Ones, and you're playing a more controlling game with Bazaar that people really, really aren't used to. And this card really allows you to do that. And was originally printed in Mercadian Masks. You see this sort of more regal version of Squee done by David Monette, but this one is just so wholesome. You look at the art of this card and how happy Squee is to just have his toy. And, you see the sunlight, you kind of see the dark clouds around him, but everything's okay because you feel it. You feel how happy it is to get your teddy bear, to get your toy, and just the wholesomeness of this.
What a cute old man this Squee Goblin Nabob is. Also was a very popular card when Survival of the Fittest was running rampant all over the place. Yeah. Because you could discard your Squee, go get whatever you needed, get your Squee back later. Card has been good for a long time. It did something very, very, still to this day, unique. Yeah.
Every single turn you can get it back. I mean, that's the original one is fine. I mean, but this one to me, just there's so much sort of heart and there's so much emotion that's wrapped up in this. And the first one was just like, I guess it's a goblin with really big robes or something.
The first one told the story that needed to be told in Mercadian Masks, where the goblins ran Mercadia. Right? So when Squee shows up and is this immortal magical goblin, of course Squee's going to be in charge and get all this regalia and all this great stuff. Right. But as you move on to the future sets where you don't need to retell the story of Mercadia, we just want to have the story of Squee. We just want this adorable old man goblin that's been cursed with immortality who loves his toy.
Loves his toy. And honestly, I'm curious if this were printed in Magic 22 or D&D set or wherever they put it, I mean, would it even see play these days? I mean, this is kind of...
Well, it's obvious that they felt the need to give us Squee the Immortal.
Right.
So I don't know if they must have felt like they can't give it to us. Like,
Yeah,
it's not on the reserve list.
It's a free resource,
Yeah, it's
right?
on the
So
reserve
like
list.
there's enough things like Chart a Course and, you know, other discard outlets, and not to mention sacrifice outlets that would let you rebuy this late game, that maybe it would be too good.
I do like Squee the Immortal a lot, though. I love just, nice one line of text, which is great. That's fantastic. So that brings us to our number one.
Oh boy, what could it be?
It was the first one in my mind, in that when I saw this thing, I was like, just absolutely took my breath away. This was one of the iconic cards, just like the Nourishing Shoal, of really selling the set. Wizards was like, Magic 2010 is different, y'all. It's different. We're starting again. We're going back to old school. We're going to show you guys like some really cool fantasy creatures. And I mean, just blew me away with this one. Ruben, what do you think about it?
It is the perfect marriage of flavor, name, tournament playability, and of course art. And nobody does fabric folds and wings and a night sky quite like Greg Staples does on Baneslayer Angel.
Oh.
Baneslayer Angel is 3 colorless, white for a 5/5 angel with flying, first strike, lifelink, protection from demons and from dragons.
Yeah, this card was just so cool and absolutely gorgeous. And the artwork itself, I think, recently sold for like $50,000 or something. Yeah. So that's a thing, because, you know, again, this is just some of the most gorgeous angel artwork I can think of. The fact that it's down to like $4 or $5 is just mind blowing to me.
It's wild.
Because
this is like the first $50 mythic.
Yeah, this was when they first started like the mythic stuff and really sort of pushing, just really saying, look, we're really going to try to see how far we can make creatures and creatures be good. We didn't get these stats. Now these stats are, you know, it's like a good rare these days. But back then it was a serious mythic that blew you away.
It's also incredible how many decks still just fold to a Baneslayer Angel. Like, if you're playing Modern, you know, the blue-white decks will sometimes just be like, well, here you go. And then you're like, ah. I have it in my Cathrall deck, like I mentioned, because if you deal with Cathrall, that's fine. There's a Baneslayer Angel. Have fun with that. And then they're just like, ugh.
And it's just terrific. And I've loved that card ever since it showed up.
I love the protections. I mean, cards that have cards that have flavor text without being flavor text.
Right.
Like this, and of course, Elite Inquisitor is another great example. It's like, it's a Bane Slayer Angel. It slays Banes. Like, this is everything I want a Magic card to be.
And it was terrific. And that was our top 10 Greg Staples cards. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you what card we did not choose, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-hosts. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
We talked a lot of really good tournament staples in this episode.
Wow. So many staples. So much. So I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and UltraSleeves.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Camel and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at MagicMikes, on Twitter at MagicMikesCast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.